Dillon Danis finding himself in the middle of another wild brawl wasn't exactly shocking, but the chaos that unfolded at UFC 322 still managed to feel unreal. What started as a loud scuffle quickly ballooned into a scene that immediately reminded longtime fans of the madness of UFC 229. Every time a security guard managed to break apart one pocket of chaos, another would flare up somewhere else, like someone kept lighting new fires. Danis wasn't just arguing or shoving, he was actually scrapping with multiple Dagestani fighters at once, including Abubakar Nurmagomedov and even John Pork, who had been sitting close enough to dive into the moment things started. The entire area went from a normal crowd section to a storm of bodies, limbs, and yelling. And somehow, through all of it, Danis ended up standing there holding his shoes that looked embarrassingly clownish for someone who had just tried to fight off a wave of people. It became clear fast that this wasn't some random disagreement. This was the never-ending feud between McGregor's circle and Khabib's circle flaring up again. The kind of conflict that doesn't need new fuel because the leftovers are already burning. It's almost an unspoken rule at this point that when those two worlds collide, things go downhill instantly. And regardless of how that beef started years ago, it still lives on in moments like this where one spark sets off everything around it. When the crowd finally relaxed and the fighters returned to their seats or were escorted away, the story immediately shifted backstage. Dana White was forced to address the whole mess during his post-fight press conference, and he didn't hold back in taking the blame. He explained that before the main card even started, he was notified that Danis was in the arena but not sitting in the ticketed spot assigned to him. Security asked if they should remove him, but because he legally had a ticket, White decided they should just keep an eye on him and let him stay. What he didn't consider was how many Dagestani fighters and friends had been placed in the first few rows that night, especially since Makhachev had just headlined. White admitted that the moment he heard the noise, he knew immediately what the cause was, because all the ingredients for disaster had been sitting just feet apart from each other. By the time security managed to drag Danis out and calm the sections around him, the UFC staff called White again, asking if he wanted charges pressed. He refused, saying that even though things got ugly, this is still the fight business and emotions run hot. Still, he made one thing clear: Danis wouldn't be attending UFC events again.
Brawl broke out with Dillon Danis and the member of Khabib's team and stuff. Can you just tell us how disappointed you were to see that and any insight into the fallout?
I blame myself for that, actually. They came back and told me right before I walked out for the main card that Dillon Danis was here and he was moving around sitting in fighter seats and not sitting in his own seat that he had. He had a ticket. And they said, "Do you want us to throw him out of here?" And I said, "He has a ticket?" And I said, "Yeah." And you know, they told me, they said, Masvidal said he's going to fuck him up on sight. And I said, well, where's Masvidal sitting? He said, well, he's 6 or 7 rows away from Masvidal. I said, well, if the guy has a ticket, let him sit in his seat and let him do what he's doing and keep an eye on him. It never even crossed my mind, as stupid as this could be, that the entire Muslim Brotherhood was here tonight in the first 5 rows for Islam. And as soon as it broke out, I was over on the other side and I go, fuck. I know exactly what that is. I knew it. And, yeah, you will never see Dillon Danis at a UFC fight ever again.
Even as all this unfolded in the crowd, the fighters inside the cage kept the night intense, starting with a debate sparked by Topuria moments after the main event ended. While many were praising Islam Makhachev's dominant performance, Topuria was having none of it. He went after Jack Della Maddalena first, pointing out how unprepared the now former champion seemed against a high-level wrestler. He believed Della Maddalena needed an entire training camp dedicated only to wrestling because the gap was that obvious. Then he went after Makhachev, criticizing him for lacking something emotional. something natural that he believed no training camp can provide.
Topuria, I don't know if you saw his tweet. He said you're like the most boring fighter in the UFC or something like that. I know you said to ask you about him after the fight at Media Day. Can you give us your full thoughts on a fight with him now?
No injury, nothing. I don't feel any pains. I'm ready. Who is gonna be next? Let's do this, and I will make it easy. And today I show you, Jake's one of the best in this game. You know, one of the hardest opponent. That's why I prepare so hard to make this easy. And this is our plan. And I did exactly. He defends. I try to do some chokes, try to make Kimura, but he defends very well. But I make this easy because I training so hard.
Makhachev's future now hangs in a weird limbo. Both he and Topuria recently vacated their original titles after moving up divisions, and both captured new belts at higher weights. Makhachev walked through Della Maddalena at welterweight, while Topuria claimed the lightweight strap by beating Charles Oliveira after Makhachev moved on. The two now sit at the top of two divisions that are shifting beneath them, making the possibility of them crossing paths again one of the most interesting storylines brewing in the UFC. But Topuria wasn't the only one with something to say to the new welterweight champion. Shavkat Rakhmonov, undefeated and sitting at number 3 in the rankings, he congratulated Makhachev on his performance, but made it clear that the real test at 170 pounds was still waiting. Meanwhile, during the same post-fight press conference where he addressed the Danis incident, Dana White also asked about the highly anticipated UFC White House card. He clarified that the idea wasn't to build a card that pitted America against the rest of the world, even though it will happen on Independence Day. His only focus was putting together the best lineup possible. When asked if Makhachev could headline that event, White didn't rule it out. In fact, he mentioned that depending on what Makhachev does next, people might start discussing him among the greatest of all time. With potential opponents like Rakhmonov on the horizon, it's hard not to imagine that kind of legacy forming.
I'm getting the sense we're going to hear the words White House quite a lot from fighters over the next few months. Islam is already calling for that. Could Islam end up on the White House?
It's a possibility. We're talking about GOAT talk here, depending on what he does in his next couple of fights.
Does it have to be America versus the world themed and stuff like that? Would you be happy putting a non-American main event
That's
up?
not America versus the world. It's what's the best card we can build.
The women's co-main event at UFC 322 also added another chapter to the ongoing discussion around Valentina Shevchenko's dominance. She had a noticeable size advantage over Weili Zhang, something that became clear as soon as they exchanged grappling positions. Even though Zhang came out strong in the early striking exchanges, Shevchenko dropped her and followed her to the mat, where she used her size and technique to control the first round. She even secured her 60th career takedown, a milestone that speaks to how long she's been competing at a high level. The following rounds followed a similar pattern. Zhang fought back each time, returning to her feet and attempting to create range with her kicks and combinations. But Shevchenko's physical presence made it tough. While Shevchenko struggled to land damaging ground and pound, her control time and positioning won her the early rounds. By round 4, she loosened up and started showing more variety on the feet again. The welterweight division saw another storyline develop earlier in the night when Michael Morales stopped Sean Brady inside one round. Morales entered the event ranked 8th in the world, but his performance against Brady showed he's ready to join the top of the pack. He hurt Brady with the sharp strikes, and when the opportunity opened, he overwhelmed him with enough pressure to score a TKO. That win pushed his record to 19-0 and immediately raised the question of how soon he might find himself in a title fight. After the bout, he directly called out Dana White, asking for a championship opportunity. Considering the state of the division and the way Morales just handled a top challenger, that request might not be far-fetched. Another shocking moment came when Carlos Prates knocked out Leon Edwards. Edwards started strong, mixing clean striking with slick grappling that allowed him to take Prate's back and threaten a submission late in the opening round. It looked like a classic Edwards performance, composed, calculated, and methodical. But in the second round, Prates began talking to him, poking at his emotions, and that shift in energy changed the fight. Edwards bit on the trash talk, engaged more recklessly, and paid for it. Prates landed a huge knockout shot, and even after Edwards was already going down, Prates followed up with a final ground strike that sealed the ending. The upset left fans stunned, especially since Edwards seemed fully in control just minutes earlier.
Duty Black Ops 7.
Knee to the body from Prates lands good.
Prates started to find the range early round 2.
Edwards with a low kick. Prates getting his flow a bit here. Edwards needs to change this up. Oh! He sent him flying and out cold! Carlos Prates KO victory. Edwards headshot dead. Leon Edwards out cold with a massive punch, dude. Dude, Prates is welterweight Alex Pereira. Welterweight Alex Pereira. Wow.
The night had already been intense long before the brawl even started, largely thanks to Bo Nickal's highlight finish. Nickal came in aggressively against Rodolfo Vieira, lifting and slamming him to the mat before unleashing heavy ground and pound. When he realized the quick finish wasn't there, he showed maturity by backing off and conserving his energy. Vieira tried repeatedly to turn the fight into a grappling match, shooting takedowns and trying to drag things to the canvas. But Nickal kept pushing him with striking. By the end of the second round, Vieira's eyes was swollen shut, and Nickal forced him to pay for every desperate attempt. Instead of coasting to a decision, Nickal ended the fight with a perfectly timed head kick, leaving Vieira completely unconscious and delivering one of the most memorable finishes of his career.
And then just last one for me, a reaction to Bo Nickal's head kick knockout and then getting on the cage and giving the double birds to the New York crowd.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't see that. Oh, yeah, I did see that. What was that about? I was in the back. Oh, were they booing him or something?
He said he was, quote, standing up for myself. If you're going to give me grief, I'm going to give it back to you.
No, I don't give a shit.
And with all that intensity already stacked up, the wildest moments of the entire card still ended up being a fight that didn't even happen in the cage. Dillon Danis somehow managed to fight half of the Dagestani fighters in the building while holding a pair of clown-like slippers. Dana White banned him for life, the fans left with stories they'll tell for years, the fighters left with new rivalries, new targets, and new reasons to come back hungrier than ever. UFC 322 became a night full of knockouts, title implications, bitter callouts, and uncontrolled chaos. The kind of event that reminds everyone why the sport never stops surprising people.